Welcome to Rooted and Unwavering, a podcast and radio show which features leaders from all walks of life in conversations about courageous connectedness. How do we stay connected to our best selves, especially when we are challenged? What becomes possible when we truly stay committed to our own and others' greatness, also when we don't feel it? Join host Hilke Faber, transformational coach, facilitator, and award-winning author of Taming Your Crocodiles, and his guests as they explore leadership greatness in today's episode of Rooted and Unwavering.
Welcome to Rooted and Unwavering, broadcasting live from Phoenix Business RadioX in Phoenix, Arizona, where we help leaders connect more deeply to their innate potential. I'm your host, Hilke Faber, and this is the 18th episode. I'm here today with James Christensen, president of Gateway Bank. James, how are you today?
I am excited to be here. I appreciate the invitation.
Well, I feel very humbled to be here with you, and in a moment we'll find out more about why I feel so humbled. But before we talk about James, I want to talk a little bit about this podcast series to get us all centered in the intention for what we're doing here. So Rooted and Unwavering is a podcast series that is about helping to connect each of us, to connect more deeply to what's true about us in essence. Whatever that is for us, however we describe that, can be something to do with our values, with love, with compassion, with truth, with wisdom. Whatever we call that, it's not prescribed, it's an experience. And these conversations are to become inspired, to hear from different leaders and learn through their stories about, maybe I get a pointer. Just like when we're on a hike, like, I'm inspired by that tree or by that view or by that water, into maybe a taller version of myself. So that's what we're about here. And today we're going to have a conversation with James Christensen. He is the president of Gateway Bank. It's the only community bank in Mesa, Arizona. It's also a very thriving institution. I understand it's one of the strongest performing financial institutions in its peer group. And you've led it, James, through ups and downs and through to a very strong performance. James is not only a CEO and a banker. He's also, amongst many other things, a father and a very active community contributor. So much so that he was nominated and achieved the Mesa Citizen of the Year in 2023 award, which is, I think, something that just happened. And he advocates for small businesses, marginalized groups, people in need. And he does a lot in the community, including being on podcasts like this, doing one-on-one presentations, and inspiring different audiences to greater well-being and financial health. And I was very intrigued by that combination. James and I met a few weeks ago, introduced by our mutual friend, Karen Owicki, the head of Business RadioX in Phoenix. And one of the first things that struck me about was how honest you were about your path with me, James. It didn't take very long before you told me about your path and how that's informed you. So thank you for being here today.
Absolutely. No, it's been quite the journey, and it took a while to get comfortable with sharing the journey, and I'm open to it.
All right, I love that. So, question to get us into the conversation is connectedness. Connectedness with our true self, with each other, what's truly important. Tell us a bit about your journey in connectedness in your own life, connecting more truly. What's important to you?
Yeah, it's when we chatted a few weeks ago, one of the things that came up, and for me, my life-changing moment, one of many life-changing moments, was really kind of working until the point I completely broke and had a nervous breakdown. It's really interesting when you're out in the public a lot, people think, oh, you're so well connected. You have so many friends, you have all this. And at that point in life, it feels incredibly lonely. Whether that, it may not look like that from the outside, but from the inside, you're just going and going and going. And the connectedness piece I would have described as solely business connections at one point. Now, I think the most important for me is being connected to who I am, and really kind of coming full circle to being who I wanted to be or who I was when I was younger, and not, trying to be something I thought everybody wanted me to be. And I thought I had to have a family hat and a work hat. Now I just have one. And it's a little terrifying initially for everybody to see who you really are. And I think closest of friends may know that, but really what's been amazing to me is how that has drawn people to Gateway, whether they're employees or new, I don't know, I don't really want to call them customers, new friends.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. I love that story that you're leading with that in this conversation. I sense it's very important that you share this. I sense it's important.
Well, I've had, unfortunately, I've had several friends that went down the same path and aren't here to talk about it anymore. And I was at that stage just a little over 3 years ago, and it, really a shock to probably most people that knew me or knew of me. And I was just, at that particular point in life, you're just like, I had, not that I think all your values are that had changed that much, but it's really trying to be something that you're not. Some of the things you make fun of as I think maybe a stereotypical man is not talking about your feelings,
Yeah.
not really digging in. And now my wife and I, we've been together almost 40 years, so she's tolerated lots of James so far. But it's a learning journey, and even after this many decades together, we still learn from each other. And the one thing from her, and she's, my wife's name is Anita, and she is definitely the reason that I'm still here. And she's the one that put out the hand at the last minute, and it was, one of those moments that it was right time, right place. And then she really kind of did guide my care for a couple months until I started getting back on the right track. And initially, I think with mental health issues, it for me initially, I was looking at it from a point of, well, probably even more than guilt, more like shame. And I don't look at it that way at all anymore. It's a journey that, I think a lot of folks that have battled depression and anxiety, you just haven't talked about it. And I've been amazed at how much deeper of a relationship you build with somebody when you're really authentic with them.
Oh, that's amazing. How much more deeply you build relationships with others when you're authentic and with yourself. I'm struck by so much of what you said already in this conversation, James, right? Like I used to be connected to my business relationships first and basically only. My sense is also you were living something that was over there, but not you. There was a work James and a real James, maybe. And I also love that you talk about coming full circle from a place that's not you to a place that is you, that you remember from being a child. Now, my sense is that's a journey that many of us are on or taking or at some point on that trajectory. I know for one that I've been on that one, and sometimes it's a spiral, it keeps going. So tell us a little bit about what drove you to basically lose connection with yourself. How did you get to that point? Because my sense is you weren't doing it by saying, James was saying, oh, I'm going to get disconnected from myself and feel really bad. That's probably wasn't your motivation. What was your motivation that got you to the place of a breaking point?
A combination of things. The work piece of it was really probably just the drive to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
And my thought was how you do that is you just endlessly work. And I've come in to prove that's not true either. What's been really interesting on the business side is as I've achieved more balance, and I have to say, talking about work-life balance isn't a new issue. But and until 3 years ago, I was very open. I didn't think that was a possibility. I just said work-life balance there's no way that can be achieved at the level I'm at right now. And I was completely wrong. You almost wear it as a badge of honor that, oh, I didn't use half my vacation. Oh, I didn't take any days off.
Right.
even, and talk about, being present. You don't get, when I would go on vacation, I was tied to my phone. I was, I still didn't get a break.
Mm.
And even then, I didn't get to enjoy the moment. And the other thing, there's just personal issues that come up in everybody's lives that I think can weigh heavy on you. And if you have, I'm somebody that feels very deeply.
Mhm.
So if I have a friend that's hurting,
Mm.
I hurt.
Mhm.
And it's, I can usually, one of the things I found out is I could carry that for them fairly well, but I couldn't do it for me.
Mm.
I could give grace to anybody but myself.
Yes.
And so many things I've learned about everything I thought in my head that was selfish is not. It was more self-care and getting healthy. And, we've at the bank, and not that it was the intended effect at all, but we've grown significantly. I work less hours. I take all my vacation. I take plenty of time to relax. And my team feels that.
Mm.
I was really adamant that my team did not work overtime, but I did. And it was just, yeah, it's just things I wished I had learned 30 years earlier in my career.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for sharing that sense of striving and always having to work, not thinking there's such a thing as work-life balance, especially not at your level being a CEO of a bank. That's not happening. This is not a possibility. So I'm never resting. What did that feel like inside of James? Let's say before the transition. What did that feel like? What was it like to be you back then?
Just an incredibly high level of anxiety.
Mm.
And I literally went decades of sleep deprivation.
Mm.
And I had just kind of got to the point where I'm like, okay, 3 to 5 hours is normal. If I got 5, I was thrilled. And it was usually broken up into 2 or 3 pieces. And it was just always anxious. But, I think even in the toughest of times, there's moments of joy. But to really, like, when I started getting better, my wife's like, she's like, it's good to have you back. And, it's like, it's really good to be back. You're not present. You're not there. I wasn't feeling much of anything. And one of the big things I've learned over the last 3 years is really that, I thought I could just like turn off an emotion.
Right.
And what I found out is I pretty much turned them all off.
Yes.
And just got to the point where I survived.
Mm.
And sounds very stereotypical, but I feel like I'm thriving now, and I feel like my team is thriving, and I'm like, wow, this is way better than just trying to
Yeah.
get through the day.
Yes. The reason I'm pausing a little bit on the darker side of the story is because I sense some of our listeners may be there, or some of us. I know still have a tendency to be on that darker side from time to time because we're not like a computer that just gets reprogrammed and it's all over. So actually hearing your story, James, for me personally has been very helpful to hear about your overworking and feeling disconnected from yourself. Actually, my husband sometimes says that to me when I'm overworking and it's Friday night. He said, Hilke, are you there? And my sense from you is that Anita is so welcome, so happy to have you back.
And I will definitely get the are you here? It's just so interesting that so many of the things that we're taught when we're young, I do think everything we need to know we learned in kindergarten. By kindergarten. And it's just getting back to the basics and really every day is not good. Every day is still not good, but I have tools to deal with that now.
Yes.
Like one that I've really spent a lot of time on is, for decades of working, I've been a banker for 37 years is people are like, well, if you're having a bad day, don't bring it to work.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, if you're having a bad day, it's okay.
Yes.
It doesn't mean you're going to treat everybody poorly, but if you're struggling, it's okay to share that.
Yes.
And it's also okay if there's one day that it's just too overwhelming, it's okay to go home too.
Yeah.
And I think that's and that's not just for me, that's for my whole team. And I think that's been the relationship I talked about deeper with friends, I have an amazing team. And they have been so supportive. And when I was out of work for 6 weeks, they literally stepped up and did everything. And I'm like, I don't think many folks could get their team to back them like that. But they were backing. It was more of them being okay with what I was going through. after that, some folks sharing, either their experiences or family members' experiences. And it's like, okay, now that you've talked about this, let's talk.
So part of what the leader does, you set the stage and you create a context for people to feel safe to actually share more of their true self as well. And whether that's I'm so happy or I am really depressed, and it's all welcome. It's all welcome is what I'm hearing and I sense from your energy.
Yeah, when we have, it's the good times are great because we were dancing in the lobby this morning. So we were having fun. I had my hip hop music on. It was a good morning.
Uh-huh.
But there's mornings where, yesterday one of the team was having a tough day, and there's a time to celebrate. There's a time to just be a little more quiet and reflective, and leaving that space for somebody to come in and have a conversation with you. So I feel like my office is kind of like the therapy office, but really what's even cooler than that is it's spread throughout the entire team.
Huh.
So that, everybody's been what I would call the Brene Brown moment, vulnerable with everybody else. And there's not near as many, I don't know if secrets is the right word, or just not being fully authentic. But
Yes.
I had one of my team come in a couple months ago, and she's like, and she basically made the comment, this is what family feels like real family feels like. And I'm like, I told her, I'm like, you just made my whole year.
Yes. This is what family can feel like. Yeah, when we're really close and really open with each other. That is very beautiful. That's very beautiful. I would like us to just take a brief moment, if you like, if you're willing to do that, just to share with us a little bit about how you went through your valley. My sense was you were in a place of very great darkness inside, like a lot of depression. Tell us a little bit about, if you're willing, how you went through that. And because I think all of us can learn, whether we have the same experience or whether we have an experience that is maybe experience light or experience more intense. I think it's really helpful for people to hear that. So if you're willing to do that, that would be really good.
Yeah, it's how authentic do you want me to be? Are you okay? There's some things that are tough to talk about, but there's, like when you start talking about, suicidal ideation, I don't want to overly stress out your listeners.
No.
But really for me, it was, when kind of right when all this happened, I had, I didn't sleep very well for years, but then I hadn't slept at all for 3 days.
Yeah.
And your mind starts doing all kinds of crazy things after 3 days of no sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when, to me, and one of the things it was incredibly difficult to talk about a suicidal ideation with my wife. My kids have, now that they've heard dad a few times, they know what happened. They didn't right away. And it was, in trying to explain suicidal ideation and what it meant, what it was for me. And, at that particular point in my life, it was a comfort, which sounds really screwed up and backwards. But it was like, hey, if things are too overwhelming, this is an option. Looking back on it now, things I would have missed my youngest daughter graduating college. I would have missed my 35th anniversary with my wife to finally make our first trip to Hawaii. I would have missed those moments that just a pure joy that seems to be way more. But really at that very bottom, it was leading up to it probably for about 6 months to a year.
Mm-hmm.
I would have days where I literally, every hair on my body was standing up, and I'm like, I have to go home. I just have to go home. And I'd want to crawl up and like go to the guest room, shut the door, shut all the blinds, and just nothing. You'd have a good day and then a bad day, but it was just, there seemed to be getting more and more bad days.
Mm-hmm.
And then in my mind, things were really starting to add up. And the tough thing if you're talking to somebody that's never struggled with depression or anxiety, which I assume a lot have, right? A lot I've talked to have, but there's not a logical reason for the depression. Usually, sometimes there is, but it's just like this is where whether this is all reality in my head, this is all reality,
right?
And then trying to figure out how to talk through those issues. So instead of, probably the big difference between then and now, instead of just holding it, it's like, let's talk about it.
Let's talk about it. So you were even in that suicidal ideation, And I'm grateful you're able to say that, right? Because there's so many words in our lives that are sort of off limits, but they're still there.
Yeah.
We can't sort of cut them off. They happen. They're here. So the question is not whether they're here. The question is, what do we do with them? And what I appreciate about you is that you are speaking about that and therefore bringing light and awareness to this. So I'm very grateful that you're doing that for myself and for my senses, many other people that are not willing or able to use certain words, because you don't get followers for that in this society. There's many things that we think we should be, but not that. But that's also part of us. So in that moment, as you were going through that, you had that suicidal ideation. What happened?
So it was a Sunday morning, and when I hit the rock bottom, and I had figured out how to end it, what I was going to do. Right before I was getting ready to leave the house, my wife walked in. I was changing in the closet. My wife came in, and I just literally not that I don't have an issue with crying at all. I just don't. And I just completely broke down. And, my wife's first thought was, oh, did I cheat on her? And I'm like, that's not it. So I could understand that from that my reaction. And I was just right or wrong emotion. For me at the time, my emotion was ashamed. And I knew what I was getting ready to do, and just seeing her, and I broke down, and she's just like, I remember I literally fell to the floor in the closet and couldn't stop sobbing. And she's like, tell me what's going on. And I did. And she's like, we can, we'll figure this out. And so as that day and the next couple of days came, she literally fought to get me into a hospital, and did, and then tracked me through group and, intensive outpatient and back to partial hospitalization. It's like, oh, I'm going backwards. She's like, no, you're just learning more. And she drove me every day. I didn't drive for 2 months. Even after I went back to work, she still drove me. I just was to a point I couldn't for a while. And, and it was, I wish I didn't have to go fully into the wall and hit it before I decided life needed to change.
Yeah.
But for me, that's what happened. But that moment was, and it's hard to tell the person that you love more than anything that you were thinking about calling it a day.
Yeah.
And all that could go through my head with my wife and my daughters was that they weren't good enough for me to stick around for. And that wasn't true. I never looked at it that way. It was, I would assume a selfish way to look at it at the time for me, but I was just like, it just felt like there was so much pain and sadness and depression and anxiety. It's just like, I don't want to have it anymore.
Right. It's very, very clear, very clear. And thank you for sharing that. And thank you for sharing it so clearly so that we can understand and also find the places in ourselves that visit the same place, similar places, different places. So that, your wife, Anita, was like, had some influence on you as you made the transition towards living again. So what have you learned in that process?
Really, the big thing is just, I would have always told you that my wife and I were well connected. I mean, we've loved each other for a long, long time. But there were just things I felt were, number one, as a man, that you weren't going to talk about. And for a couple of reasons, partially just feeling that that's what I was taught not to do, but also that I need to be the strong one. Always. And I don't. And it's, I was just, there was so many things I was running through, worst case scenarios in my brain. If I tell her this, if I talk about this, I didn't want to put any more burden on her. And, thinking that ending your life would not have an impact on her is crazy. But in my mind, that wasn't something I was thinking about.
Right.
I would just, that connectedness to her, the connectedness to my friends, has made a big difference. Even, even at work, just to show that, I can have I have a bad day. Before and the funny thing is, when I thought I was hiding a bad day, I really wasn't.
Isn't that true?
And, I'm like, oh, nobody understands it. And, when I shut my door and I'm like, turn on my meditation music and literally just am trying to stay sane enough to stay at my desk, they can see that. If I'm dancing through the lobby with my hip hop music, I'm probably in pretty good mood. Just being real. And the word, when I was going through all my treatment, the one word that came up over and over and over again was authentic. And my last day of group, so we would fill out sheets of paper and throw them in a bowl, and then we'd each pick one out. It's still on my desk. The one I picked out, my final day of group, said for James to inspire others by being, well, not for James, but just says to inspire others by being my authentic self. And so my first tattoo I picked up after group was to get my Be Authentic tattoo. And it just meant so much to me.
So my sense is that what pulled you through was something about being real, being authentic, being reminded by life, by Anita, your wife, by your friends, by your colleagues, who James truly is, which helped you to heal, maybe loosen your attachment to those thoughts. These are my words. I'd like to explore that more after the break. To those thoughts, and I heard that I heard you say many things. I thought that, but actually that wasn't true. That wasn't true. So we're going to take a break in a moment. And James, I'm sitting here with tears in my eyes, as you can probably tell, as I'm listening to your story. It stirs a lot in me, and it also gives me a lot of hope as I listen to you, because it's very clear to me that you sit in your seat with a lot of authenticity, and also we've talked about this compassion for yourself and for others. And at the same time, you're contributing a heck of a lot to your family, to your broader community, to your company. So when we get back after the break, I'd like to explore more about the part of your healing journey, what tools you used and learned. And you talked about hip hop and meditation. I love the combination of that. Dancing in the office, listening to some meditation music. I'd love to hear more group. I'd love to hear more about some of the tools you used, and also what your connection is to then being of service. Because I can easily remember, or actually I said remember, that was a Freudian slip, because I've been into a situation that was not that different from you. I also had sometimes, not to compete with you, but a week I didn't sleep at all. That this sense of like, I'm going to keep this world towards me. Like, let's please keep it contained. And I see you out there in the world. So that's another thing we're going to explore after the break. James, thank you so much. If you've been listening and just tuning in now, you've been listening to Rooted and Unwavering. We've been talking to James Christensen, CEO of Gateway Bank, who is sharing with us his transformational and truly transformational journey, capital T, capital J, about really facing some of the harder things of being human and finding a way to be honest with those, and through that honesty, finding a way through. See you after the break.
You are listening to Rooted and Unwavering, presented by Growth Leaders Network, the leadership, team, and culture development company. If you would like to learn more about working on connectedness for yourself, your team, or organization, please contact Growth Leaders Network on LinkedIn. And now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Rooted and Unwavering. We've been talking to James Christensen, CEO of Gateway Bank. And James, you've been talking to us about a truly transformational journey. So tell us a little bit about the tools you've been using.
So I can give you a little bit more process on the journey, and then exactly what I'm doing now. So for me, this whole journey started with, you learn so much kind of in hindsight, and every stage is different. I was in the hospital for a week, and I look back on that, and I learned a lot there. Probably the biggest thing I learned in the hospital was, this group of people you spend time with that are going through the same thing that you're going through, literally from every walk of life, from homeless to incredibly wealthy. I'm not that person. And everything in between, male, female, LGBTQ, veteran, not everything you can think of. And after a couple days together and sharing in group or doing yoga together, y- y- the love they can show you is just mind blowing. And in that point in your life where you don't think anybody could love you, you're this total stranger who you probably never would have met under any other circumstance, showed that. So that was, that was one of my big takeaways from the hospital. My other was that was the first time in my life I ever did yoga, and I found out how amazing it was. After that, I went into group intensive outpatient, which is 3 hours a day, and I did that for a couple weeks, and I had a really good therapist in that group, and was having some good discussions, but I was really stuck. And she's after a couple of weeks, she's like, I think you need to go to partial hospitalization. And in my mind, that was going backwards. Every stage of this journey, the first day was terrifying because it was all new. Then I went to, my partial hospitalization was ended up being a very small group. We were right at the very beginning of COVID. And my lead therapist I had is just a couple years older than my oldest daughter.
Right.
She, for whatever reason, just found a way to connect. And we started, and there was revelations in that period of time that I'm like, wow, it's amazing what your brain does to protect you, and that a memory can get buried that deep. Some of the things I thought were all the major issues, some of that was true, but some of it was even much deeper than that. And then really the step beyond that was just, they gave me a really nice handoff to a therapist afterwards. And I was with her until about 6 months ago. And then she's like, I think I've taken you as far as I can take you. And so I moved on to another one where we've done some somatic therapy, which has really been interesting, where your body carries stress. So I feel like each stage of that journey, I've learned more and more and more. And I'm like, why don't they teach this to people? This is amazing.
Right.
But really for me now, I've tried so many things. Probably one of the first things I tried that I really enjoy and I still enjoy is progressive muscle relaxation. Really just kind of going head to toe and feeling that relaxation set in. Meditation is part of the daily routine. Meditation is an interesting one, as you talk to friends about. They probably one of the most interesting things with meditation is that sometimes it's perceived as you can't have faith and meditation in the same space. I don't agree. It's like, well, that's relying on something else. I'm like, meditation is just absolutely incredible. And for me to be able to figure out, and I think it's going to take me a lifetime to get really, really good at it. But for me, a 10-minute meditation can take me from where I'm just like, basically claws on the ceiling to centered again. And it's like, okay, now I can handle the rest of the day. I'm good. Just it's not like I have to go away for an hour. It's 10 minutes. I go upstairs, I shut a door, and it's just me and it's quiet. And that really helps. I've got all kinds of ways to relax the muscles that I really like. I have one machine I have called the Swing Master. So we joke and call it the Swing Master 2000. And where I just put my feet in it. And, you basically just go back and forth for 15 minutes and it just kind of works all that energy out of the body. And it's just after it's over, I've fallen asleep on it multiple times. I also have something called a spunk mat, which is like little spikes. And you're like, wow, this is like torture to lay on it. It's absolutely incredible. And it just kind of changes your focus. And I've fallen asleep there too. And it's just like, for me, finding things that relax me or calm me. And then once I'm calm, then I can go right back and accomplish what I need to.
So much in what you just said. I was making mental notes in my mind. What we'll do after this podcast is we'll make a list of all these tools and maybe could put some links so people can find those resources if they're interested in that. I want to visit a few of those in more detail. The first one that struck me was this group experience you had in that very beginning of being loved very deeply by others who were on a similar journey, maybe from a different station in life, but able to fully receive you. To me, that is such a healing experience, one that I get to partake in myself in healing work that I do. And I see it in teams that I work with, where they're simply spending a little bit of time sharing stories with each other about what's really going on. And there's something that opens miraculously of a certain connection that sort of goes beyond the day to day, that then carries us forward to do amazing things. So, can you say a little bit more about what you learned being in a group like that?
Couple experiences. I could come up with a whole bunch, but there's a couple that just immediately came to mind when you asked that. And one of them was right before I left the hospital. Somebody that I had met, we had, there's some free time. It's pretty structured, but there's some free time, and so there was a business owner that was there, and he says like, "Hey, do you want to talk?" And we did, and he just kind of unloaded. And then the next couple of nights, as we finally got to the end of the day and had a little free time, we talked some more. And then I would assume he told me more in a week than he probably told some of his closest friends in a lifetime. And we just felt really connected. We were walking to lunch, and I was going home right after lunch. As we're going, it's there's definitely some rules, and you're not supposed to touch or anything. And we're walking around, and he just literally turns around and gives me an enormous bear hug. And I had a couple of the techs that were right behind me, and I just looked, and they're like, "It's okay." I'm like, "Thanks," because I'm like, I'm just like, but when there's a hug, and then there's a hug, where you can feel it, and you can almost feel the pain kind of disappear. And the hug was as good for me as it was for him, but just that really deep connection. He and I stayed in contact actually for quite a while. He's the only one I had any information on. And one of the others that I really, really got close to was somebody that was the age of my youngest daughter. Had several experiences that week, but the first day she got there, the day you show up is terrifying, because you're like, you don't know anybody. You're coming in, you're talking to a psychiatrist. They're like, "Okay, we're going to put you here, and here's this big group of people." And you're just like, ah. So I was sitting in kind of the family room area coloring, and she just came down and sat and said, "Can I color with you?" And I'm like, "Sure." So we really didn't talk a lot. We just colored, and I finished, she finished hers, and then as she finished coloring it, she flipped it over, and she's like, "What's your name?" And then she wrote me a note and gave it to me. And then so I got hers, did the same. There was a couple times during that week, and she's, when she would have a down moment, people would be like, "Can I give you I'll give you a hug." And she's like, "I don't need a hug. I need somebody to listen to me and be with me. That's it." And I'm like, wow, that's just, our family's a hugger and are huggers. And but just to basically, I took that. I just need to connect with somebody, and somebody to see me for who I am right now, even in my bad moments. And so I still, to this day, and we have that picture at home. My wife has it somewhere. And when we came home, we took it out, and she's like, "Oh, who this?" And I flipped it over, and I just literally cried like a little kid again. And I'm just like, she's like, "What's wrong?" And she's like, "I didn't mean to, to have this harm you." And I'm like, "No," I said, when I see the picture that time, all I could see was all the pain behind it, even though it's a beautiful picture. And so that's something that 3 years later, I still haven't seen, but I hope, I'm sure I will at some point. And it was just that, you don't connect with everybody, but there's a handful of folks that you're just like, wow, this is like so deep. And one of the homeless people that I sat and had lunch with every day, he and I were just, it was just like, we joked about the two of us would never be together. And then to start sharing these experiences and everything we had in common was pretty amazing.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. I know that I can talk to you for hours just listening. It's just really nourishing actually to hear your stories. Where my mind's going is, I can imagine listeners thinking, so what does this have to do with being a leader, right? What does this have to do? So tell us a little bit about does this have anything to do with leadership? And from your perspective, how has this shaped you, how you lead?
I've always had the compassion piece has always been strong. Showing weakness has been something, well, I don't even show it as a weakness, just having a bad day, or my struggles. And I think a deep part of that connection with the team is you're just like me.
Mm.
I struggle like that. I have days like that. I just don't hide that part of myself. That part's open now. And we definitely attract, folks that like, some folks want to go to work, do their job, go home,
Mm-hmm.
don't really want to connect. People that like want to have their work family, or even some folks that maybe home life has been hard. And it's like, wow, this is what I have here is amazing.
Yes.
And just having that space to watch everyone succeed
Mm.
and grow and there's been so many side benefits that have happened. One of the things I just thought of when my very first day in the hospital, I went up, met the psychiatrist, and I'm a complete mess at that point. And she just put her hand on mine and she's like, "This is going to be the best thing that ever happened to you." And at that point you're like, "Yeah, I don't think so." And now I'm like, wow, it's too bad it went to that point, but I am so grateful for having gone through what I did. And now I can, I think there's things that your team are like, "Oh, James has probably never had, you don't have the anxiety, you don't have the depression." And it's like, I do. And I have those moments where I think I'm completely worthless. And then I have those moments where I feel incredibly strong. And the one that I thought everybody wanted their leader to see is that you're always, always strong. And, I think when you're the leader, you do need to guide the ship. But I think it's okay to say, this is who I am.
This is who I am. So leading from a place of, this is who I am. Who are you? Let's be real, not hiding. And I hear you speak about the connection, the meaning, the fulfillment that happens at work. Can you speak a little bit about what's the impact, the quality of the conversations, the quality of the decisions, and your performance as a business? Because you are one of the strongest performing businesses and community banks in your peer group. So can you say more about that?
Yeah, we're not, instead of walking in the morning and saying, "Hey, Hilka, how you doing?" You're like, "Good, fine." We don't really have that conversation. And it's more of, "Hilka, I know this was a concern. How's it going? Or how's your mom? Or how's your husband? How's this?" And you'll get a full answer, and I get the same. And I think there's just sharing your authentic self draws that deep, deep connection. And it's not like I'm, the team's asking those questions because they're like, "Oh, this is what James wants us to ask now." It's like, no, I'm asking because I genuinely care.
Yeah, that's great. So there's a genuineness. How does that translate then into how the business operates, how teams work, how they disagree, how they go to conflict, how they make decisions, how they commit to stuff? How does that work?
There's always conflict. So, but it's different. It's healthy. And when you're all trying to make a decision for what you think is best,
Yes.
you may come at it from a different direction. And that's something I've been very open with the team. Whenever we have our planning or work sessions or anything else, I'm like, assume there's no limits, assume there's no boundaries. And, not if we throw 50 things on the board, some of them may not be achievable. Let's just start with everything. What's been really cool when we have our planning sessions with the entire team, some of the folks, there's always people in your organization that are more outgoing and some that are more introverted.
Yes.
But some of those folks that are introverted and quiet have some of the most amazing ideas.
Yeah.
And, sometimes you have to draw that through, where you're basically putting things on a Post-it and they really don't know where it came from. And others times they're willing to share it openly. But even if it's been shared behind the scenes, I'm always like, can I tell everybody, are you okay with that? And they're like, "Oh, now you can."
Yeah.
And it's like, this was this person's idea. And they're like, "Wow, that's amazing." And they're like, "How'd you get that?" I'm like, "I just asked."
I just asked. And I can imagine that the capacity to just ask and to just say is a sign of a really deeply healthy culture. And that includes all of your emotions, ideas, whatever it is.
Yeah, I had, you have those, when I was at my worst, the gratefulness piece was non-existent from my life, regardless of anything. Not that there was nothing good happening. I just couldn't see it. And yesterday, one of our longtime clients was at the bank, and he'd already walked out the front door. And I'm just like, I just had this really giant feeling of gratefulness.
Oh,
And I went out and I'm like, I really appreciate your support over all the years. And he just stopped and he's like, he said, I appreciate support from our side, but I'm just like, I don't know. It just seems like we don't take the time to say thank you
ah,
and really feel it and be like, wow, even in, whether it was my good times, my bad times, you were there to help me and you were there supporting me as a client. And really the growth as a bank has come as our brand has been more authentic, more open. It's amazing how many people can relate to real. And not that it's just Gateway or it's just me. It's like if when you
mm,
think of an organization with really good culture and openness, people are drawn to it.
mm,
That's the coffee shop you're going to go to. That's the mechanic you're going to go to. And you're just like, you don't see companies with really good culture go away. They don't.
mm,
These people where when I walk in the door, I feel safe. I feel
mm,
comfortable. I feel
mm,
like I can come in and, I can have a customer come in and cry and it's okay.
mm. I'm just getting another motto for Gateway Bank. It's like being real together, like really being real. The the question that was on my mind before the break, I want to just ponder for a second, which is, so I'm amazed by you, James. Just in case you didn't notice, because you're integrating so many different parts, right? The parts of the deep healing, the part of being a CEO, of leading a thriving business, and it's all part of this thing, and then being in the community, being of service. Can you say a bit more about that last piece, about being of service in the community? You were nominated and got the Mesa 2023 Citizen of the Year award. So what drives you to serve, and how is that related to you being real?
The recognition part of it's a little embarrassing, but the fun part was I got to have for that particular event, you can pick who you have speak on your behalf. And it was our two daughters, and they're just incredible. I told my wife when it was for that night when we got there, she's like, "What do you want tonight?" I said, I just want to enjoy the night and be there. And I did. As far as service, it really comes from both sides of our family have Methodist pastors. So we kind of grew up serving. It was what we did, whether it was at church or, whatever organization it was. And for the longest time, I would, the majority of the nonprofits are all excellent and do amazing things, but I was really to the point where I had overcommitted. And, I'm involved in several boards right now, but they're all ones where their mission is amazing. Service is what makes our life better here, in my opinion. And it's, that when I serve, I almost feel guilty when I leave because I'm like, the people that you serve fill you up so
Mm,
much. Maybe a piece of it is that they're like, thank you.
mm.
And you're just like, when you can, when somebody says something that you feel it on the inside, you're like, that's service fills me up. So I think service gives me the energy to do what I do at work.
Service fills me up. It gives me the energy to do what I need to do at work. That's so putting it upside down, because I can imagine for people considering being of service, thinking just like first day at the group therapy, yeah, that's like I don't have the time or I don't have the energy, and you're actually putting it upside down. You're saying this is something that gives me energy. We're getting towards the last bit of our conversation, which again, from my perspective, could go on for a long time. I want you to think about people who are maybe in the midst of it, in the midst of maybe being lost or having those two personas and just not knowing how to bring work and home or work and real person together. What would you want to say to them?
That's a really good question. I was fortunate to have somebody around that could guide my help. Not everybody has that luxury.
Mm,
That's one of the things we try to put out in when I speak or when we have an event is that and I feel it with a lot of our clients is that you are, I mean, yes, we're your bank, but we love you as well. I think for the people that are doing well or have been on the journey, you can not always, but you can usually see it in someone. And even if you don't, it's just, having that for me. And now, like if I'm at a coffee shop or I'm somewhere, I just express deep gratitude regularly. When you tell somebody you love them, and then when you ask them, what can I do for you?
Mm.
And if you wait a second and hold eye contact, they'll probably tell you. And I think that's just that, trying to really connect on a one-on-one level. When I have people that speak to me about something, a deep issue or that they're going through, I mean, I'm pushing my stuff off my desk. I'm like, okay, I'm all in. My phone's off. I'm here. And it's just, I think, being fortunate enough to find some way that's going to say, I've walked your walk and you're not the only one.
Right.
At the time, it feels like you are.
Yes.
And it feels like you're on that journey by yourself. And I think it's just being more self-aware of what's going on around you and being able to, a conversation you may have with somebody you walk by on the street, Hilka, you may have just made a life-changing, it may have been a life-changing moment. You won't even remember it.
Mm.
And I think it's just showing that kind of love.
It's again paradoxical. Thinking about when you are in the midst of it, meaning on the darker side of the journey, you feel anxious, depressed. What I'm hearing from you, maybe that's a time to express gratitude and to be of service. Because am I thinking about what you said before this and then this? It's like, yeah, it's how you connect back to an energy that gives to you.
Yeah, the connectedness, and wherever you find that, I don't think we can do this journey on our own.
I'm also very struck by what you said about the being in the group, having people from very unexpected walks of life, the homeless person, the therapist who was your youngest daughter's age, even your wife when you're in the closet, just to show up. And what I sense in you is an openness to that. And literally, bad metaphor, but allowing yourself not to stay in the closet and just get out and however you do that, it's very meaningful. As I'm reflecting on this conversation, James, I'm having many ahas, and some of them already have words, and some of them are brewing. So they'll be brewing with me as I reflect on this conversation. But one of the things that I think will stay with me for probably the rest of my life is how you so decisively break down the barrier of openness. It's like, let's be real. Let's just be real. And then the strength that comes online. It's such a, like this has been a conversation about paradox. My ego, we haven't talked about that, but my thinking mind doesn't think I can do that. And then paradoxically, on the other side of what I don't think I can do lies grace and gratitude and energy and healing and unexpected sources. You would have never met those people that you celebrate in this conversation. So those are some of the things that I'm taking away for my own life and that I will share with others as I talk to them. What are some of your final reflections from our conversation, James?
It's just most of what we've talked about today, I didn't even have as a thought as far as what I wanted to talk about. It's just, so I appreciate the free flowing conversation. And I feel like I've learned a lot from your comments as well this morning. And it's just, really for me, it's wear one hat during the day. Be you, be authentic, show love, be present, enjoy the happiness. If you're having a sad day, feel it and share it. And just, it's, trying to bottle that all up inside doesn't work very well. It's just a matter of time before it's going to come out, and however it's going to show itself. It just seems like we're a society where we're just trying to get through life. And I think to enjoy the people you spend time with and you meet during the day and thank them for who they are and what they do, you will get back way more than you give.
Thank you. Thank you. I have an image of you jumping in the pool every second. I'm just going to jump in and the water is going to hold me. Thank you for that, James. It's been incredibly moving and meaningful to be with you today. If you've been listening today to Rooted and Unwavering, this was a podcast with James Christensen. He's the CEO of Gateway Bank. He practices realness, authenticity, and shared with us his healing journey that brings great stillness in me as I reflect on it, and awe for the human experience and people like you who are willing to move through it. Hope you heard something you find helpful. If this kind of conversation appeals to you and you want to continue listening, you can find James Christensen at Gateway Bank. He's available at different networks and also coffee shops, I understand.
Absolutely.
And you can also connect with Rooted and Wavering. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple, and other places. You can watch it on LinkedIn. And you can also connect with GLN and with me, whatever you like. Our next episode will be with Bert van der Hoek, who is a person from the Netherlands. He's the CEO of the Trimbos Institute, which is an institute for mental health, national mental health, probably quite related to what we've been talking about here. And today we've been talking with James Christensen again, talking about realness. I will be here again next week. And until then, I hope you take good care of yourself. I hope you took something from this conversation that helps you to be more connected and being real. It definitely has helped me. Until next time, this was Rooted and Wavering, where we connect leaders of all walks of life to connect more deeply to their innate potential. See you next time.
Thank you for joining us in today's episode of Rooted and Unwavering, leadership conversations about courageous connectedness, presented by the leadership development company, Growth Leaders Network. To learn more, subscribe to this podcast, connect with Growth Leaders Network and Hilke Faber on LinkedIn, or read Hilke's award-winning book, Taming Your Crocodiles. Now take a moment and appreciate something that is great about you. Celebrate the gift that you are and enjoy connecting more deeply to your best self today. See you next time on Rooted and Unwavering.